And as we've been hearing, May the 9th is Victory Day in Russia. It marks the Soviet Union's role in defeating Nazi Germany in the Second World War. President Putin will lead the celebrations, which include a military parade in Moscow. Now, you're seeing images of today's preparations. Putin will be looking to use the pomp and pageantry of the day to put a positive spin on his war in Ukraine, despite the Russian military's sluggish campaign there. Now, the occasion is also usually celebrated by ethnic Russians in Latvia, which was occupied by the Soviet Union for 5 decades. But authorities have banned celebrations this year in the wake of Russia's war on Ukraine. DW correspondent Juri Rescheto went to Latvia's city of Daugavpils. Here, many residents speak Russian or are even Russian citizens, and this conflict has left them questioning their own identity.
There are few cities in the former Soviet bloc which carry as many traces of the Soviet past as Daugavpils in Latvia. With more than 90,000 inhabitants, Latvia's second largest city has been considered a Russian stronghold until today.
Every fourth person living in Latvia is Russian. This is the only city where Russian-speaking people are even in the majority.
Most Russians came to Daugavpils during the Soviet era after World War II. Many residents here continue to feel culturally drawn to Russia. Some criticize the Latvian government because it requires them to speak Latvian, the official language, even though many Russians can't speak it.
Language needs a linguistic environment to live in. A person must be able to speak. If he can't, it creates problems. We want a Latvia for everyone, so that life remains calm here.
The divide here between Russians and Latvians is evident every year on May 9th, Victory Day over Nazi Germany. But while Russians celebrate the day, for many Latvians, World War II also represents the beginning of Soviet occupation. This year, authorities finally decided to cancel events because of Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine, a move some criticize.
Surely this celebration isn't meant to humiliate the Latvian nation. But we Russians learned to celebrate this in childhood. We have it in our blood. It shouldn't be taken away.
Recently, in the capital Riga, hundreds of people from Latvia's Russian-speaking community protested against the Russian invasion and held a rally in solidarity with Ukraine. In the center of the Latvian capital, Russian speakers living here wanted to show that they do not support the policies of Vladimir Putin. But not everyone thinks so, notes Russian-language journalist Inna Plavoka. A big part of Russians believe the Russian propaganda and stand behind Putin, she says.
Our society is divided right now. I can feel that our communities are not united, and that scares me. This is a big problem for the security of our country.
Plavoka says the linguistic divisions in Latvia further separate people. And she believes the responsibility lies with Russians who won't integrate. But she suspects Russia's war in Ukraine could now change that.
I suddenly felt very clearly that I am a part of this country. It's a difficult admission, but I don't want to be part of Russia anymore, even though it's the country whose language I speak.
In any case, the eternal flame at the Soviet memorial in Daugavpils will burn on Victory Day. Even without the official celebrations.
Let's speak now with Konstantin Egert. He's a DW correspondent and Russia expert. Konstantin, hi. This parade has been rehearsed for days now. What will the 9th of May be this year? Because after all, Russia hasn't had this triumph in Ukraine that it really hoped for.
Yes, everyone is speculating about it. And visually, there's going to be an interesting element to this parade in a fly past, which has become a pretty standard staple of this event every year. There's going to be a participation by Ilyushin 80, the command and control presidential flying headquarters that are supposed to be used also in case of nuclear war. So this huge plane is going to be, for the first time, flying for everyone to see along the Red Square during the parade. And I think this is quite significant and I would say ominous because it is very likely that in his speech, Putin will probably mention some kind of doomsday scenario. He will essentially threaten unleashing Russian nuclear weapons in case the world and Ukraine don't bend their knee to Moscow. And I think that this particular sort of element of the parade, participation by the presidential kind of flying fortress HQ, is a signal.
Now, huge preparations and ominous ones, as you say. You've just been speaking a little bit about what we can hear from Vladimir Putin. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Well, I suppose that there were a lot of speculations about what exactly Putin is going to say. And I may be wrong, of course, but I think that because of a lack of visible, clear victory in Ukraine, Putin will have to go around it. And it's either promising the Russian-occupied territories like the Donetsk and Luhansk regions or the Kherson region, which was mentioned in the previous report, to be accepted into Russia. But I think with no preparation or no visible preparations for a referendum, that's probably a bit risky for him. Or he will have to say that Russia is stronger than ever, and if anyone tries to interfere, we're going to strike you with nuclear weapons. And I think that this is a bit more probable, although it's quite disturbing.
Konstantin, let's talk a little bit about Russians themselves, because given these vast international economic sanctions and the fact that we don't really know, of course, when this war is going to end, how is the Russian government preparing them for the impacts on their living standards and possibly other sacrifices that they'll have to make?
Well, the preparation is usual for the Putin regime. It's relentless 24/7 propaganda, first and foremost of all. Secondly, some money handouts to some, I would say, strategic maybe elements of the economy, but that is not huge. And I also think that there's a very active work by the government on trying to bypass and bend the sanctions. And it's an interesting. There's an interesting detail to that. There's a former minister of the economy in Russia who was jailed for corruption. He's been urgently set free from jail, and he's a very, very good economist. His name is Alexei Ulyukayev. So he's been urgently set free on parole from prison, and it seems that he's been going to be given a government post to work on, let's say, creatively bypassing sanctions. So I think Putin will not stop because of economic sanctions. He will try to bypass them. He will try to use his ties to, I don't know, India, China, to get more economic aid. But I think the essence of it is that sanctions, at least for now, will not stop this war. They, as we know, sanctions usually show their effects over time, half a year, probably more. And this is a huge time when we talk about the conflict of the Russian assault on Ukraine.
Konstantin Egert there, our DW correspondent. Thank you.